It was back in late December when Lee first warned friends on WeChat about a SARS-like disease going around. Lee sent a group message saying that a test result from a patient quarantined at the hospital where he worked showed a patient had a coronavirus. But hours after hitting send, Wuhan City health officials tracked Lee down, questioning where he got the information. But instead of being praised, Lee got a call from Wuhan City Police. He agreed to sign this document, admitting to spreading rumors online and severely disrupting social order. It reads, "We want you to cooperate with the police and listen to our reminder and stop the illegal act. Can you do that?" Lee answered, "Yes, I can." In the weeks that followed, the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission maintained that there was no obvious evidence for human-to-human transmission, no infection of healthcare workers, and that the outbreak was, in their words, preventable and controllable. And with that, the people of Wuhan continued about their normal lives.
When I flew back to China, things started changing day by day. The first day that I got back, everything was normal. I was very, very excited to see my family again. I haven't seen them since the tour started. No one was really talking about no viruses or anything like that. We all went for dinner that night. And, for the next couple of days, people started talking about something. But I would say that even then, there was still a lot of skepticism about whether, if this was truly as bad as they made it out to be. I remember just thinking that, it's just a phase, that it's gonna pass over in a couple days.
But we begin tonight with the growing concern as the toll from that deadly coronavirus now grows. And in the city of Wuhan, where the outbreak began, patients now in isolation, all trains and planes out of that city halted just tonight.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
Wuhan, as a city, shut down as a whole. Definitely it alerted a lot of people. Day by day, the conditions of the entire city, country just started getting worse and worse. We're seeing that Americans are getting flown back.
Meanwhile, the government is planning another airlift to bring 1,000 Americans home to 4 military bases for quarantine.
It's mandatory now to wear a face mask when you go out. Everywhere that you go now, mandatory temperature checks, was just that's unprecedented. First, to have a city shut down and to enforce a lockdown that deeply. They're definitely not making a joke out of this, and I feel that they're doing all they can to contain the virus. If you're on the street these days, you can see that people are very, very protective, and there are definitely real people suffering. This outbreak has also gotten people extremely paranoid into thinking that they have the virus themselves, and hospital lineups these days are just out of the world.
By the end of January, Dr. Lee posted this picture with the words, "finally diagnosed." He had the virus.
It's my first time in a car in over 2 weeks. But what are we doing today? Why are we in a car? I don't know why I'm here.
I went back to work this morning and then I came back. I see Mom sends me this message and she said she ordered coffee, but instead she ordered the wrong place and they don't deliver, so we have to go pick it up, and then it's pretty far.
Oh my gosh.
It's 8.8 kilometers.
Why don't we just get a coffee somewhere else?
Well, she paid already.
I mean, it's just a coffee though.
It's Starbucks, so it's expensive.
Yeah, it's a Chinese mentality.
Yeah, so every time we go out, we have to take this ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah, 谢谢. So 2 people and 2 tickets.
So 2 tickets. So we can't bring a third person in?
Yeah.
Everyone's still wearing, that guy on the street's not wearing a face mask. So technically I can report him. Oh, but he has the face mask down. My flight is canceled, did you hear?
So did you have really?
Yeah, March 5th, it's canceled.
Oh.
So I'm here indefinitely. Would you want to leave if you had the chance?
Right now?
Yeah.
No.
Why is
It's
that?
more dangerous to be on the flight
Yeah,
or like
that's
a
true.
cruise.
Yeah, that's true.
Why would I risk that, right?
Well, it's sunny today though.
That's pretty funny. What's Monday too?
What does it have to do with anything?
Well, Monday usually people go back to work. Like when company has like meeting and stuff.
but why does that contribute to the sun?
When I see it, I feel like every community and then they're actually acting really fast and responsive
Yeah.
on this kind of issue. Like it's, you know, everyone's like measuring your temperature, like, you know,
Yeah,
like everyone's
exactly.
like contributing like on fighting the virus, right? So like, I think that's something really good and impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said about
Yeah.
that, man. You know, they're very, very strict.
Yeah.
Like, you can't go anywhere without getting your temperature checked, and you know, it's a hard situation for everyone.
By the way, Mia's been staying for like a month.
Pardon?
Mia's my daughter, by the way. Yeah, she's like 1 year old.
And she's been.
like super happy, but yeah, she hasn't gone on in like a month.
Have you heard, like, in the West, people are talking about like what Chinese people eat and stuff like that? Like, to me, it's almost like more just the lack of knowledge, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like when the Wuhan thing first came out, everyone in China, like other than people in Wuhan, were making fun of like what people were eating in Wuhan. Because they're like, how could Wuhan people eat this? That's insane.
I think it was started with these like bloggers, or
Yeah.
like it was like two kind of like pretty girls, right? And then they were just like, you know, like shooting a video, and then they were like, off the bat,
Ugh.
and then they're just saying like, oh, it's good for your skin or something, and then they were like, it started to like kind of just like cracking the wings and stuff.
And it
just-
turned out not even to be in
it's just
Wuhan, right?
so yeah.
Jesus.
Sorry, I have to
But-
drive and then speak at the same
Yo, like people, they were getting death threats in China.
pretty scary.
People here were like, but then in the West now, people just think of that and they think of entire China, which is like, I guess it's understandable at a time like this. You know, everyone's just paranoid.
Dude, can you see this person's car beside us? Do you see the little dots? Or, oh, that's a little chickens.
Oh, it's nasty.
Like it's just like shaking its head. Like, oh,
Look at the mall. This is what a mall looks like, right?
these are like closed.
Yeah, look at this. Everything is closed. What does that mean? Look, we can't even get.
点了一个外卖，然后一直没有来拿。哦，对，这个。它冷了吧？
So you can't even go into the store, hey?
Yeah, you can just only pick up
How many coffees do we have?
2. Which one you want?
湖北省武汉市中心医院李文亮医生在抗击疫情中感染新型冠状病毒肺炎，经全力救治，不幸逝世。国家卫生健康委表示深切哀悼，为保护人民生命健康做出了重大贡献。我们表示崇高敬意。
The 34-year-old ophthalmologist diagnosed Saturday with the Wuhan coronavirus, dying less than a week later in the same hospital in which he worked.
Earlier today, or I should say, Dr. Li Wenliang, actually passed away. I'm hearing that he was one of the first people discovered the virus and was known as like the whistleblower. I don't know much about him except doing some quick reading before this. This is a shitty day, man. This is a shitty ass day.
If you were in this mall a month ago, you would be able to hear your own footsteps. Today, not the case. On March 19th, Chengdu officially announced that there are no more cases of the COVID-19 left in the city. Chengdu is one of the first major cities in China to announce such a big revelation. While morale is clearly going up in the city, precautions remain the same. Some malls now even enforce a sticker rule. You will have to stick these on to your sleeve or any part of your body that is visible to show people that you have been tested and that your temperature is normal.
And most people are still wearing face masks, but it's good to see the city being so lively again. So many cars on the street, so many bikes, so it's a good start. A wise man once told me that a situation is never as good or as bad as it seems. Well, for China, though the coronavirus is now leaving the city, the damage it has created is still very evident. For N1, Danny Wu, Chengdu, China.
Hi, Danny. Good to see you again on N1.
Thank you, Yuka. It's great to be back on your show again.
It's really good. Thank you, and of course, your dad and your sister in helping with your first ever report. How was that?
It's a lot harder than it looks. It's definitely given me a new perspective on how it's like to be out there in the open. You can never adjust for weather, stuff like that. And even saying just a simple sign off took me multiple chances. So it definitely showed me a new appreciation for people like you.
Oh, we are underestimated, journalists all around the world. Anyway, we've seen life in your report is literally blossoming in your city, which is a city of 16 plus million people, after months of collective self-isolation. It's good to see that. We really do need news like this more these days. So let's talk about the impact on you and your family that this situation has created collectively.
For my family, I came to China basically for a short vacation for a Chinese New Year. And I was kind of just stuck here because of the situation that happened. But I think that it's also important to put into perspective that in Chengdu, the city that I'm in right now, at its apex, the coronavirus, we never had over 150 patients. I don't think even 140. But so our peak was around 150 in the city with a population of 16 million. But if you were here during that period of time, you would know that they were treating it as if there were 140,000 people infected. It was very, very
seriously, as it should be. And those are low numbers for a city such as Chengdu, city of 16 million. How important was this, what we say in the West, extreme quarantine that we've seen in the cities like Wuhan?
I think China is very lucky on the fact that there are very little poverty level, basically no homeless people, and everyone, if you're a citizen here, you get an apartment and you live in a community. So it makes it very easy for the government to go and just start quarantining communities that they think might be in danger of having contracted the virus.
Yeah, sounds like a city I would like to live in, actually. So most things, Danny, we talk about, you and me, in the past few months is actually the fear and anxiety that can lead to social stigma towards the Chinese or other Asians, especially in the United States when it comes to Asian Americans. Stigma, discrimination, xenophobia can occur when people associate an infectious disease such as COVID-19 with a population or nationality. We've seen those cases around the world, as I said, mostly in the United States. What would you say to those people who are doing that? And how important is it that the governments fight this downside of the epidemic to at least address it?
I think that in the United States, when the politicians started calling it the Chinese virus, there were a lot of debates going on as whether that was ethical or not. To me, locationizing a virus, you can argue both sides because there has been precedent for it, and albeit that was 100 years ago. But my problem with locationizing the virus was that, first of all, that was to distract the public from the real problems that were going on, so people would argue about where the virus came from. And secondly, it was during a time where Asian Americans were beat up, assaulted, verbally assaulted in the streets, and to basically call it the Chinese virus, you're basically giving people the okay that, you're giving people the approval to go out onto the streets and do these things, to the level where I think President Donald Trump even came out the other day and say basically that we had to protect the Asians. So
at
least
much
that's
pressure from the communities that experienced the physical and the verbal attacks against Asian Americans. So social media and the platforms such as Twitter allow many to continue spreading fake news or hate speech. So where do we draw the line between hate speech and freedom of speech? And how is that handled, for example, in China?
In China, it's there's no freedom of speech. If you say something that the PRC don't like, you'll get censored the next day probably. However, there's still a lot of leeway. There's 1.6 billion people, so it's hard to censor everyone. And people usually have like a day or two of wiggle room for everyone to see what they said before it gets taken down. As for in the West, I think that from my point of view, if you've looked at a situation critically and you looked at both sides of the argument and you studied the arguments and you come to an objective conclusion to form your own opinion, I'm completely okay with that, because freedom of speech is very important in a healthy society. But where the line gets drawn is that if you're making hateful remarks based on your own personal prejudice, I think that's grounds for hate speech.
So I would like to go over a tweet or two that actually is a good example of that. This is a columnist, this is a journalist from the UK, and she said, Alison Pearson, she said, after this, let Made in China be a badge of shame. It's pretty tough statement, especially for somebody who's a journalist.
Yeah, it's at a time like this, everyone you need to point the finger at someone. So I guess
there's a blame game.
People are gonna vent out their anger. So I'm not gonna let that be my view of the West because of the comments of just a few minorities.
Few minorities. Let's hope that
minority
that will
people
stay like that. Exactly. So there has been a similar discuss for the market. We have to discuss this. We have to ask this question because we've seen this a lot on social media as well. So there has been similar discuss for the market. The virus is supposed to have originated from, even though scientists say it might not be the case at all, after all. So let's make these things clear. There are 1.6 billion Chinese. How many actually do buy at wet markets that are illegal in the world? And what's going on really?
I think that I was here when the outbreak was started. So when there were rumors going around about supposed pictures from the wet markets, people in China were equally disgusted at these people. On the other hand, though, I'm very fortunate to live in a place like Chengdu where it's very modernized. The food is Sichuan food, which is basically Western Chinese food, what they stole from it. And I've heard stories of wet markets in different parts of Asian countries before, and I think that it's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. But personally, I don't know anyone that goes to these wet markets, and they don't exist in the places that I live in. I think while it doesn't affect me personally, because people I know don't eat at these markets, and it's such a small, dense population of underground culture people that do illegally now. But what disappoints me is that, when people make generalizations about Chinese people in general, it's not me that it's affecting. I think about, my parents, my family members, my friends over here who don't understand English, but they're being thrown into this generalization of, these savage Chinese people who just eats bats every day, and it's just completely not true. And they don't even know what's being said about them. So
There's a different perspective. You're given it a completely different perspective. Like you said, you live in Canada, you're Canadian too, so you have the chance to see what the real story is, what people are saying, and you can actually say something about it. But when it comes to your parents and your family, yeah, it is a different story. It is a different story. I'm very sorry to hear that, actually. Will this change your entire, but you said already wouldn't, but will you change entire view of the West after everything is over and done, after we are back to normal, if that is even possible?
With the West as a whole, definitely not. There's always going to be people doing crazy stuff that are just inappropriate, and especially in a situation like this, the whole world is angry right now. People are saying things that they don't mean, or people are saying hateful things they do mean, but I'm not going to let those opinions generalize the whole society.
Don't do what they're doing, right? Don't do what they're doing.
Basically. And so when I'm coming back to the West, I'm back home right now. The situation is definitely a lot worse than it is here. So for the time being, I'm just going to stay put in China until the situation gets better in Canada, and I'll be back ASAP.
Danny, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me again. And thank you again for the report that you've done for us exclusively. And of course, say hi to your dad and your sister, Jessica, and of course, the rest of your family.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me back on your show. It's honestly such a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure too. Thank you.